limitations of quantitative sales forecast. So what I mean by limitations of quantitative sales forecast is, what are the problems that could be encountered when you are using modeling, like moving average, or you're using your 4-year calculation, when you are using those information to get your forecast. When you are using sales forecast for information, what are the problems you could encounter? Well, what you have to put in mind is this. With events of the past, they are not a good predictor of what could happen in the future. So what has happened in the past, informations of the past, might not be useful when you are deciding about what could happen in the future. So that is what it simply means. Because quantitative forecast means you are using maybe time series, which means you are thinking about informations of the past to decide what happens to the future of your business. So here I got. The problem about sales forecast is that what has gone before is not always the best predictor of what is to come. So what has happened in the past, like I just explained, like I just said, what has happened some years back might not be a good predictor of what is about to happen. So it might be difficult for you to use information in the past to decide what happens to the future of your business. So this implies that things in the past might not be helpful predicting the future. I think that is clear.
Yes.
So for a quantitative sales forecast to be more reliable, it should maintain the following conditions. One, it should be used for a short period of time, not for a long time. So for you to have, yes, quantitative sales forecast is important because it can also help you to decide what to do, what happens to your business in the future. But if you want it to be reliable, it means you have to use it for a short period of time, not for a long period. So that's for reliability now. For it to be reliable, for it to be useful for you. If you don't want the problem we're talking about to occur, it means whenever you are thinking about quantitative sales forecast, it has to be using it for a short period of time. Most time, 6 months. 6 months or below 6 months. You shouldn't think about using quantitative sales forecast of 5 years ago to determine what happens in the next years. Is it clear?
So you can't use the old data to...
You can. 6 months ago is better than when you use 6 months ago is better than using 5 years ago.
Yes.
That is what we're talking about. So for you to have a realistic information, you think about short period of time rather than long period of time. 2.
6 months ago.
Yeah, it's still closer. Yeah, 2. They must be revised frequently to take account of new data and other information. So it needs frequent updates. Do you get the point here?
Yeah.
So whatever information you have, you need to always keep up with that information. It needs to be updated so that when you want to use it to forecast your sales, it will be important. It will be helpful. Not letting it be the way it was. So the information you have some 6 months ago, even for 6 months ago, you should still think about getting the latest information. So always update it for it to be reliable. The third one, those preparing the forecast must be experts. So that means they must have a good understanding of how to produce a forecast. So for your forecast to be reliable, it must be handled by experts. And when we talk about experts, we're talking about those who understand how to produce a forecast. Do you understand? So these 3 things will make your quantitative sales forecast to be reliable. If not, there are going to be problems. So for you not to encounter problem when you're using sales forecast for your business, 1, it has to be for a short period of time, which means the maximum you could use is for 6 months. 6 months before that time you are predicting. 2, it must be understood. That means you have to give it to those who understood how to prepare a forecast. Do you get it? And the third one, it must be revised frequently, which means it must be updated. Do you have any question about that?
No.
Okay. So we go down to casual modeling and line of best fits. So when we talk about casual modeling, it's another way of using quantitative sales forecast. But here, it means you are using data rather than using information. For time series, you are using information that we got for the past. Information about sales, information about information about sales, information about the years, the numbers of years we used. So for casual modeling, you are using data. That means you are using statistics of numbers, you're using figures to determine your sales forecast. So here I wrote, casual modeling tries to explain data, usually by finding a link between one set of data to another. For example, finding a link between the amount of a business has spent on advertising and its sales. So here you're talking about finding correlation between two variables. And when you talk about correlation, you're talking about the relationship between two variables, which means you're talking about sales and advertising. When the product is made already. But before you start selling the product, you might think of advertising the product. So now that you've advertised the product, what is the result you get? What was the return of the advertisement? Has it brought more sales? That's what we're talking about here, about casual modeling. You are using a correlation between two variables. The relationship between the advertising you did and the sales you make. So you've made advertisement. And what you should expect if the advertisement is successful is a boost in your sales. So you are finding a correlation between them. That is what we use. That's what we meant by using casual modeling. Is it clear?
Yes.
So here I wrote, the graph will show a correlation. That is the relation between two variables, namely advertising and sales. You're talking about two variables. Advertising is a variable. Sales is also a variable. It's not constant. It goes up, it comes down. So you're finding a correlation between them. So when you're finding a correlation, what are you going to get? Figures, data. So it's different from using time series. Here you are correlating, you are finding relationship between two variables for your casual modeling. So then it can also decide the correlation coefficient. That is where we are really going to. There's what we call correlation coefficient. And what is correlation coefficient? It means the extent at which the relationship between the two variables are. The extent of the relationship between sales and advertisement. Oh, we made the advertisement. We spent so amount. We spent $10,000 on advertisement. Oh, the sales is about 150,000. So we can say 150,000 divided by 10,000. So we have 15. So this is what we call correlation coefficient. The extent of relationship between the two variables. Do you understand correlation coefficients?
Yes.
So we have a formula for correlation coefficient. It is summation xy divided by the square root of summation x squared multiplied by summation y squared. So what's that? Summation, I told we did that in time series when we're talking about the line of best phase, when we have to use the coordinate x and y. So it's still the same here, but here we have correlation coefficient, which is the sum of xy. What is x? The total number of years divided by number of years. The total number of years divided by the number of years. That means from 2000, you add the sum of the years. 2006, you had it with 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011, 12. You're adding those years together, divided by the number of years, 6 years. So 2006 to 2013, that's 7 years. Yeah. Divided by 7, that is summation x. That is x. Therefore, y, the total sales trend, where you are getting your modeling, okay, the moving average. Do you understand? So where you get your moving average, I told we did that yesterday, the moving average. Where we use our moving average. So whatever you get in your moving average divided by the number of years you have put together. Oh, you're using 3 years or 3 periods. So when you're using 3 periods, we meant the sales of January, the sales of February, the sales of March, or the sales of, yes, for these 3 periods. Oh, 500 for January, 600 for March, for February, 700 for March. That's 500, 600, 700. That's 1,500 divided by 3. That gives you 500. So that is your total sales trend divided by the number of years, which is 3. So 1,500 divided by 3 gives you your y. Do you get it now? So here we have x, which is what? The total years, the sum of the years divided by the number of years. Y, the total sales trend divided by the number of years. Mm-hmm. So for your correlation coefficient, it will be R, which means R is used as correlation coefficient equals to summation XY, which we know X now. The total years divided by the number of years, multiplied by the total sales trend divided by the number of years, divided by the square root of summation X squared. That's the sum of, or the summation X now. What's your X? If your X is 500 squared, multiplied by, if your Y is 1005 squared. So that gives you our correlation coefficient. Do you have any question about that? Do you have any question, please?
No.
So we've talked about correlation, which means the relationship between two variables. And when we're talking about variables, we're talking about maybe X, or maybe sales and advertisement. So advertisement is a variable, sales is a variable. When we are finding the relationship between them, using causal modeling, we have to find the correlation. Do you have any question about that? Do you have any question, please?
No.
Okay. Now we go to qualitative.
So summation means,
Okay. Summation means the sum. The sum of.
what's that?
That's the sign for sum. That's the sign for sum. It means summation. Summation of xy. That means the sum of x multiplied by the sum of y divided by the square root of the sum of x squared multiplied by the sum of y squared. Is it clear?
Yes.
All right. So we go to qualitative forecasting. So when you talk about what's the difference between quantitative sales forecast and qualitative sales forecast? For quantitative sales forecast, we are using numerical data. But for qualitative sales forecast, we are using people's opinion and judgment.
Yeah.
To decide the future sales. You are using people's opinion and judgment to decide future sales. That's what we mean by qualitative forecasting. So here I wrote qualitative forecasting. This uses people's opinion and judgment rather than numerical data. So you're not using time series, you're not using causal modeling. Rather, you are using information from people. Or yes, information from people, judgment of people, people's opinion to decide the sales forecast. So what are the reasons for qualitative forecasting? Most of the time, businesses would not want to use qualitative forecasting because it's people's opinion. But when there are no information, when you are unable to gather data for your quantitative sales forecast, then you have to go back using what? Qualitative forecasting. Do you understand why we use for qualitative here?
Yeah.
So here I wrote reasons for qualitative forecasting. One, there may be insufficient numerical data. Using causal modeling or moving average, you're going to get information, and you're going to get figures. But if these figures are not good enough, or you are not convinced about these figures, you might go back to using people's judgment or people's opinion. That is qualitative forecast. That's the first reason. So, due to rapid changing in the market changes. It's not constant. So things changes, things evolve in the market. And as a result of that, it is important for you to not dwell with figures, rather get information from what is happening right now from people. Because customers, people, they buy every now and then. It's not like the figures in the past might not be useful now. Like what I said earlier, using information of the past to predict the future might not be reliable. So don't always dwell with quantitative information. Rather, think about information of now, people's opinion, because they are in the business, they are in the market, they are in the field. So you could get information from them right now, rather than holding on to that figures you have in the past. That is why we're talking. That's why we have to use qualitative forecast. But remember that before you talk about using qualitative forecast, it is important to start using what? Quantitative forecast. So businesses, most of the time, they use quantitative forecasting. And when we talk about using quantitative forecasting, we might talk about using time series analysis. For the time series analysis, you use your moving average. And you can use causal modeling. And for causal modeling, it means you're gathering data finding correlation between different variables, the relationship between variables for your sales forecast. Do you have any question about it? Is it clear, right? Okay. So that's about